Hi everyone, this is Callie. Thanks so much for being here with me today. I'm creating a watercolor card and pairing it with a beautiful embossing folder for today's card, combining a bit of spring and a bit of winter. The stamp set I'm using today is illustrated by Susie Plantamara and is called Forever Yours. There's a large, beautiful bouquet, but there's also a rose stem and some different single images for you to create your own bouquet. I'm going to use this middle-sized arrangement here so that it will fit inside the Snowglobe embossing folder that I'm going to use later just perfectly. Right now I am embossing it over some Arches watercolor paper with some no line ink from Honeybee Stamps. You've got to stamp it a few times to get a good enough impression so that you can still see it but still get a no line look. So I've got my tools laid out here. I have a cup of clean water and my half pan of paint that I'm going to use. This is Pyrrole Crimson Daniel Smith watercolor. And I'm using a damp watercolor brush to pick up some pigment or paint and then applying that directly to the paper, and then using a damp brush or the same brush, if you don't have too much water on it, you can begin to spread that pigment out. If you need to pick up more paint, you could just go directly into the paint pan to pull up more paint. And then you can clean off your brush if you want a lighter drag of the color to pull it out. And then you just kind of balance back and forth between having too much water, drying it off on my stamp chamois, and then continuing to paint before that paint dries. Watercolor for me is a balance between a moist brush and a dry brush. So sometimes you'll see that I start to paint directly onto paper and it doesn't glide smoothly, and that's because I don't have enough water. And if the paint wants to move or pool, then it has too much water. So I like a nice balance of a moist brush but not too wet and not too dry. I know it doesn't say a whole lot for you to start out as a new painter if you'd like to try it, but it takes a lot of practice and a lot of patience. No line watercoloring is no joke. It does take a lot of time. That's why I went for a smaller bouquet of all the images that were on the stamp set. So I am going to speed this up and just work my way through each section. Each section is watercolored independently from another section and not watercolored next to each other so that the watercolor doesn't bleed from one petal into the next. And that's why I'm moving around, as you can see. So when I'm done with the rose, I'm going to start working on this little rosebud here on the left. Again, each section is watercolored as a separate entity. So I make sure that I'm letting it dry before moving on to a different section and then going back to the section that was previously watercolored. And you can apply additional layers if you want. I try to avoid that because I want my watercoloring to be fast and easy. Not that this was fast, but just that I didn't want to spend extra time going back and applying extra layers. So I try to do it all in one sweep if I can, allowing that pigment to really be dark when I apply that initial layer to paper. Moving on to the leaves, I am again watercoloring section by section. So I've sectioned off the leaves into two portions, the top portion of the leaf or the right and the left, if you want to look at it that way. I'm thinking of it as top and bottom. So I'm applying the darker color at the bottom of the leaves sections and then dragging that color out to get a lighter color towards the top. While the first half of the leaves are drying, I'm going to go ahead and do the green portions of this rosebud. And then I can go back to the other three larger leaves and fill in the other halves to finish off the leaves. I didn't mention it on the rose itself, but I'm applying darker color in the nooks and crannies of all of the petals and dragging that pigment out. For the leaves, I'm applying the darker pigment at the bottom of the sections and then drawing the color out. So I've finished with the rosebud and I'm going back to the leaves, and again, I'm applying the darker color or the darker concentration of pigment at the bottom of the sections of the leaves and then dragging that pigment out to make it lighter towards the top of each section. This allows this curvature of color to create dimension and shading. Now on these larger leaves, I do go back and add additional color where I felt like it needed a bit more concentration for more saturation of color and to make it a little bit more catchy. Now that I've finished watercoloring, I went ahead and die cut it with a coordinating die. And we're going to create a background using this Sprinkle Snowglobe embossing folder. I've been wanting to use this embossing folder for a long time, and I thought it would be perfect to create like a Beauty and the Beast themed card. I'm using some Distress Oxide to color my background. You can start off with colored cardstock if you'd like, and then add some Distress Oxide ink or any kind of ink you'd like around the edges to create a little bit more dimension. I'm starting out with Speckled Egg, and I've covered the center with the speckled egg, and now around the edges I'm going to use peacock feathers. So again, I'm just going around the edge here with the darker, more vibrant color, and then I'll go back and blend the two colors together, going back between speckled egg and peacock feathers. I'm speeding through the process because there's not a whole lot to see. I'm using circular motions and going in a counterclockwise motion as well as clockwise motion to get a smooth blend between the two colors. When I'm happy with my blend of the two colors, I'm going to go ahead and put this in the Sprinkle Snowglobe embossing folder. And if you want to tape this down, you can. I don't think that that's necessary for me. I just make sure I line it up and sandwich it quickly, and then run it through my die cutting machine to get the embossed image onto my blended panel. This is so pretty, and I really wanted the snow to stand out even more, so I've gotten some white pigment ink and I'm just dabbing it on the top. I'm not pressing down very hard, but I just really wanted that snow to stand out a little bit more. After I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and trim my cardstock 1/4 of an inch all the way around. That way I can have a nice white border on my card, and then I can attach my rows, and I'm using some 3D foam adhesive squares, and this is the thinner of the two sizes that are available from Simon Says Stamp. I believe it's 1/16 of an inch. So it's not very much, but because the background is raised, I wanted it to catch. So I'm using foam adhesive, and I think that's a great adhesive to use anytime you're using an embossing folder. For the sentiment, I'm using a CZ Reverse Foundation sentiment strip. I've cut one down, and then I've added some liquid adhesive on the back as well as some black foam squares. And after adhering that in place, I can go ahead and add adhesive to the back and adhere it to a card base. And that finishes my card for today. I felt like this card is a good transition between winter and spring, and I hope you enjoyed this. As always, if you're interested in any of the products that I used on my card today, be sure to check out the links below as well as in the coordinating blog, where everything will be listed for your convenience. Thanks so much for stopping by, and have a wonderful day. Bye, everyone.